Okay, so quick disclaimer, I recorded this video before the news broke that Dune Part 2 was greenlit by Legendary and Warner Brothers, so if you are wondering why I do not mention that in this video, that is ultimately why. Dune has long been considered unfilmable. This beloved and epic Frank Herbert science fiction novel is so dense with internal lore, grandiose characters, complicated science fiction uniquities, and thematically deep plot lines that it is viewed as unfilmable in the traditional sense. After all, the book itself has a meaty and thick amount of content that doesn't translate well to a typical 2-hour feature-length excursion, which is something that can be seen in the failed David Lynch-directed adaptation in 1984, a film that, despite its small runtime, was so overstuffed with lore and plot that the movie theaters showing the film handed out a glossary of the film's science fiction terms in order to help viewers follow along, because nothing says a great escape to the movies like a study guide. And for this reason and many others, Dune 1984 was critically panned, it was a box office bomb, and its own director David Lynch essentially disowned it, because let's be honest, it was viewed as a theatrical dumpster fire. And with Dune 1984, there was a precedent regarding the impossibility of adapting this white whale monolith of a fantasy novel. There is a history of cinematic blunders here. Of course, the film industry landscape has changed a lot since 1984. Special effects are more computerized, superhero films have replaced westerns as America's genre of choice, and Disney owns everything. But one of the most important changes in the industry here is the commitments to franchises. The film industry these days loves established brands, whether it be the form of book-to-film adaptations, interconnected continuities, or numerous sequels. The monetary big shots in Hollywood love the idea of making multiple movies based on an established series or IP, which is something that is important to note when talking about the latest attempt to adapt Dune. With the new adaptation, auteur filmmaker Denis Villeneuve has a goal to make a trilogy of films, 2 based on the novel Dune, and 1 film adapting the second book, Dune Messiah. And with that, Villeneuve, the filmmakers, and the production company at Warner Brothers are really hoping that these Dune films will be the next big hit, the next big pop cultural juggernaut. This is a bold gambit when discussing the newly released Dune 2021 all by itself. While the second and third movies in this planned trilogy haven't been greenlit as of yet, the production company are waiting to see how well this film performs before investing any more money into the franchise. Dune 2021 is in and of itself a risk. As a film, it is only the first half of a whole narrative, which could have been a problem because usually splitting one book into 2 films is a recipe for disaster, as seen with the last 2 Twilight movies and the last 2 Hunger Game films, which both did not have a meaty enough of a narrative to justify 2 films, and honestly, 1 film in some cases. There is just a bad precedent there, and with that, I admittedly had worries that Dune 2021 would have suffered the same fate. Even though there is for sure enough material in the book to justify splitting the first Dune novel into 2 movies, that doesn't alter the fact that the first movie has an incomplete narrative in terms of its themes and character arcs. It is only half of a story. Dune 2021 proved these fears wrong though. The movie is overall pretty damn great. It is a science fiction epic with beautiful cinematography, deep world building, enthralling action, and is on the whole a terrific escape to the movies. It is overall an awesome film, and even though it does feel incomplete, because it's adapting the first half of a book, there is more than enough material here to justify the existence of this movie. There is enough good content here. Dune 2021's success starts with its story. The plot follows Paul Atreides, who is a young noble that secretly possesses mental super capabilities honed and trained by his mother, Lady Jessica, and is trained in combat by various people loyal to the Atreides line, the head of which is Paul's father, Duke Leto, who rules the planet Caladan, and is a well-established and powerful figure in the Empire. Yet, at the start of the film, the Atreides line is put in danger. Duke Leto is decreed by the Emperor to take over spice mining operations on the desert planet of Arrakis, which is a much more dangerous operation than it seems at first glance, because while the phrase spice mining sounds like a Starbucks endeavor as they try to mine new ingredients for all of their fall-based menu items, the situation is actually very serious. See, the spice on Arrakis improves human health and life longevity and fuels interstellar space travel. It is very important, and seeing as Arrakis is so heavily concentrated with spice, it's a pretty big deal and is very profitable for those who mine it. Furthermore, the task of mining the planet for spice place is easier said than done. For one thing, Arrakis is very hot. In fact, there is so much heat in the air that it can dehydrate anyone who isn't wearing the right oxygen mask or recycled water suits in short order. The heat is just dangerous like that. With that being said, the political situation is arguably even more fraught. For one thing, Arrakis' indigenous people, called the Fremen, despise the Empire, and the Harkonnens, who originally ran the spice mining operations on Arrakis, are plotting their next moves against House Atreides, and it is up to Paul and his father, Duke Leto, to ensure that their venture is successful and that their familial house stays intact. The story is surprisingly understandable. As someone who has never read Dune and never saw the prior David Lynch adaptation, I was surprised that I was able to follow along with the events on the film as easily as I did. Sure, there are a lot of characters, plot lines, political intrigues, and important world-building segments, but the movie eases the viewer into its science fiction world and concepts rather than overwhelm the viewer with new information too quickly. It just does not blitz you with new fictional uniquities, and instead the movie is very patient and deliberate in the ways it doles out exposition, and as a result I was never lost, which is a shock seeing as Dune as a book was synonymous with being a dense read. It is, well, Dune. Density kind of comes with the territory here. Admittedly, Dune 2021's thoughtful pace does cause the movie to be a slow burn. The first half of the film is less about advancing the plot and more about establishing all the narrative elements and characters, whether it's Paul's super mental capabilities, Lady Jessica's relationship with Duke Leto, Duke Leto's more honorable characteristics, the hostile nature of Arrakis, or introducing the Fremen's religion where a prophesied off-worlder leads their people to prosperity. The movie's plot moves at a very slow and methodical pace. It tries to make sure that the viewer is following along. This is the right move overall. The world building in and of itself is enthralling, and even though the first half of the film is slow by all accounts, there are always new plot elements introduced at regular intervals that keeps the viewer engaged with the action on screen in the first half of the film. And in the back half of the movie, all of these narrative seeds planted early on pay off in an action-packed and character development spectacle that is electric. Seriously, the last half of Dune 2021 is a damn thrill ride in terms of explosive sci-fi action, character moments, and notable narrative momentum that ultimately concludes in a satisfactory manner. And while yes, at the end of the film there are many plot threads that go unresolved, the movie only adapts the first half of Dune after all, the movie does end at the right spot, and does so in a way that feels narratively correct despite how this narrative is split. It works as its own movie. Dune 2021 is terrific from a nuts and bolts perspective as well. Starting with the cast, the movie is stacked with high talent actors like Oscar Isaac, Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, Rebecca Ferguson, Jason Momoa, Stellan Skarsgård, Josh Brolin, Javier Bardem, Dave Bautista, and probably my barber. And regardless of character, there's a lot of good and talented actors here, and they all add their own unique spin to these characters. For a few examples, Chalamet's Paul Atreides is thoughtful but troubled, Rebecca Ferguson's Lady Jessica is simultaneously Paul's doting mother and stern instructor when it comes to Paul's mental superpower training, and Oscar Isaac's Duke Leto is an immensely likable presence who just perfectly embodies the concept of a noble and honorable ruler. And regardless of whether we are discussing these characters or many of the others, the entire cast is on point. They are all good here. The cinematography is on point as well. The film is beautifully shot, framed, and composed, and regardless of scene, there is always something visually interesting happening on screen. There's a great mix of colors, lighting, and science fiction splendor that just captivates the viewer, which is honestly important in the first half of the film, considering how slow the first half of Dune 2021 otherwise is. Accompanying the great world building, the visual eye candy keeps the viewer engaged with the film even at its most ponderous. It gives us a reason to remain intrigued, because it is well done. Hans Zimmer's score also does the same. The soundtrack is often very thoughtful in how it inspires the viewer to reflect on what is happening on screen. Sure, the soundtrack has its more bombastic moments and can be more style over substance, which is kind of like the rest of the movie, but damn it, the soundtrack really does emphasize the film's style in the best way. It is always interesting. So you may have noticed that I haven't discussed the themes yet, which is something that I generally do when I review anything, because themes are overall very important in art in the sense that they deliver a pathos pathos and ethos to a given work. But the problem with Dune 2021 is that the movie is only half a story. I can't really discuss the themes because my understanding of the whole story is incomplete. The end results of the narrative remain unclear to me, and the characters themselves don't exactly have much in the way of meaningful arcs. Even though yes, they do change situationally compared to where they were at the start of the movie, there's still a lot of unknowns here, so I can't exactly sink my teeth into the film as of yet. Still, Dune 2021 is a terrific science fiction experience. While it is for sure only based on half a book and is slow in some places, the movie is overall a rollicking good time. It has a very detail-rich science fiction world, cool world building, stellar performances, high stakes, a fun soundtrack, and beautiful cinematography. And with that, I hope that Denis Villeneuve can continue this story in a sequel, because this movie deserves it. After all, Denis Villeneuve is one of the best directors working today. He directed the stellar Blade Runner 2049, Arrival, Sicario, and Prisoners, and Dune 2021 is of similar high quality and demands a follow-up. It deserves to have its story completed. And with that, that was the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a like rating, subscribe, ring the bell, and leave a comment telling me what you think about Dune. Also, please consider checking out my Patreon page. The link is in the description. And speaking of Patreon, I just want to thank my patrons, especially my high tier ones, and David, Samantha, Devlin, Mom, and Morgan. Thank you so much for supporting what I do. Love y'all.